Hello world, Noah here, and welcome back to Modern JavaScript. In this video we're going to talk about Webpack, which is an amazing tool that will let us bundle our code and dependencies into one single package. Now before we take a look at Webpack, let's understand the problem that Webpack actually solves. So let's say that we took this code, this hello.js code, and we wanted to send it to a server to run on a server, or we wanted to send it to another person so that they could run it, so on and so forth. So we have our code here, 5 lines of code, very straightforward, but you can see that we depend on this package called request. And so if we go and take a look at it, we can take a look at the code inside of request, and you can see that request depends on some stuff itself. It depends on this other package called extend right here, and then it depends on some other files inside of its directory, and I think elsewhere there's some other files it depends on. But the basic point is that all of this code here had to be installed in order for request to be installed. So in some way or another, there's some sort of dependency tree that links request to all of this other code. And so the basic point is that in order to run this project, in addition to these 5 lines of code, we also need all of the code, or some of the code, in node_modules that makes the request library work. And so if we wanted to send this to someone, we would basically have to send them the hello.js file and the node modules folder. Let's just take a look for 1 second at the node modules folder. You can see that right now it's 4.2 megabytes, or it actually says 5.7 megabytes on disk, which is pretty large, right? Because this is just a very simple file that queries a URL and prints the result, and it's already 5.7 megabytes worth of code, right? So it would be probably infeasible to send all of that, especially when we start working on larger files or larger projects. Some of my projects have node modules folders that are, a gigabyte large or even larger than that. And so it's infeasible to send the node modules folder. It's also a lot of files to keep track of, and they all have to be, put in a specific place, and it's kind of a pain. And then the other problem is that if you send this to someone and you tell them that it requires the request package, and they go to install request, they might install the wrong version, and then your project won't work as expected. Or you could send them the hello.js package and your package.json, but then they would have to have Node.js and npm installed. They'd have to basically run npm install to install all of the dependencies and then run the project. The essential point that I'm trying to make is that any way you dice it, it's a mess. But when we use Webpack, what Webpack can do is it can combine our code with all of the code that we need for our dependencies to create one small file. It's going to create just one file, not, our code and then a folder full of other code, but just one standalone file that you can run with Node that will just work. And so basically you can apply things to this like minification. You can make the file size smaller by making it, essentially unreadable. But the point is that you can distribute it in a way that it's smaller and that it just works. You can also do something called tree shaking. And so what that essentially does is, we use this request library, but we only use it once for this very simple task of querying this, this endpoint and then getting the result. But there's surely other functionality to deal with, other HTTP verbs like, post or put or delete or whatever. The point is there's a lot of code that we're not actually using, and so Webpack can actually eliminate that code. So the final bundle will be a lot smaller than the 5.7 megabytes of our node modules, because it's only going to take the code that's actually used, and all of the extraneous code, all of the features that we don't use will be ignored. Now, Webpack works by using something called static analysis, and that basically means that it's going to look at your code as it is. It's going to basically read your code and figure out what's going on. So it's going to see that you call require with the request library, so it knows that, that you're using the request library, and then Webpack can dive into the request library, and it can look at the code that you're using from this file and all of the imports that that code uses, so all these requires here. And then it can basically build out the dependency tree, figure out what code it needs to include, and then it can sort of bundle it. And the last thing that Webpack will do is, you can install lots of plugins that do different things. You can install plugins that will basically make your code more compliant, so you can write something using a newer syntax, and then Webpack can output it in the older syntax, so it'll work on more browsers, but you can sort of use all of the greatest new features of JavaScript. So the point is that Webpack is a fantastic tool, and I think that by the time this video ends and we've gotten it all set up, you'll agree with me. So let's actually do it. So of course Webpack is a package and it's on npm, so we can use yarn or npm to install it. For this series I'm going to be using yarn myself, but you can use npm if you prefer it, absolutely no problem. We're going to need two packages. The first one is Webpack and the second one is Webpack-CLI, which is the command line interface for Webpack. So we can basically lets us run the Webpack command in the terminal to, perform the operations that we need. And now these are actually going to be dev dependencies, right? Because we're not going to be using Webpack in our code itself, but it's basically a tool that we use for the development of our Hello.js project. So this belongs in the dev dependencies section. We're going to write yarn install, or yarn add, rather, -d, capital D, or you can write --dev. That marks it as a dev dependency. And we need Webpack, and we need Webpack-CLI. It's going to go ahead and search for all of the packages that it needs, then it's going to download, and it's going to install all of them. So you can see this progress bar gives us a good look at the progress it's making in downloading things. It's installing everything, and now it's done. So you can see that it installed a ton of stuff. Now, of course, none of this extra code, all these extra packages, they're not going to make it into our project because they're just used by Webpack itself. But the point is that Webpack has a ton of dependencies. And if we look in our node modules folder, it is now a lot bigger than it was before. We can also take a look at the package.json file, and we can see there's a new section called dev dependencies that has Webpack and Webpack-CLI. Now, if you install these to your dependencies and not your dev dependencies, it really wouldn't make a difference because it's still going to be installed just the same way. There's basically the difference so that people know, when they go to look at your package, oh, these are the things that it actually needs in order to work, and these are just the tooling that you used in order to develop it. So the dependencies are really the only thing that we need to make it work. We can ignore the dev dependencies, if we're looking at someone else's project. But either way, as long as it gets installed, then we're good to go. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a Webpack configuration file. This package, or this file, needs to be called webpack.config.js. The name is important because Webpack will automatically look for a file called webpack.config.js when we run the command. And so we're going to import the path library. This library is built into Node.js, so you don't need to install it. Then we're going to do the module.exports is equal to an object, and this object is going to be the configuration file. So we need a couple of things here, and you'll notice that as I start typing, Webpack is actually going to WebStorm is actually going to suggest things for me because WebStorm knows that this is a Webpack config file, and so it knows basically what I'm going to be typing. First is entry, and this is going to be the file that we want to run, and this is going to be hello.js. The entry point is basically the main file, the file where all of your code starts, and so that's where Webpack will start when it's looking for dependencies. Then the other thing that we need is the output, which is going to be an object, and inside of output you can see there's a bunch of different things there. But the two that are important is the path and the file name, I think. So the path is going to be the directory that we want to put it in, and we're going to do path.resolve, and we're going to do __ dir which is the current directory that our code is running in. So Webpack is going to run in the hello directory, and we want to put it in a folder called dist. So it's going to create a folder called dist in the hello directory, and that's where it's going to go. And then file name, we're just going to call it bundle.js. So all this is saying is it's going to start with the hello.js file, resolve all the dependencies, all the code that we need in order to work, and then it's going to output a file called bundle.js, and it's going to stick it in a folder called dist for distribution inside of the hello directory. And the last thing we want to do is we want to specify the mode. And there are basically two modes, which are either development or production, and we're going to choose development. And by specifying the mode as development, Webpack can apply some defaults to optimize it for development, and then we can make a separate configuration file for production, which we'll do a while down the road, and it will apply different defaults for the production mode. So this is all we need. This is our configuration file for Webpack. We've specified the mode as development. This is a development build that we're doing, the entry point, and the output path and file name. So now we have all of that set up, and we're almost ready to go. Now we're going to want to open up our package.json file, and we're going to want to create an entry called scripts. And you'll notice again that WebStorm will recommend names because it knows that this is a package.json file, and it knows what belongs in there. This is one of the very many reasons why I love WebStorm. But essentially, scripts is going to be an object here, and we can specify different scripts that we want to run. So we're going to do start, or we can say build, and build is just going to call the Webpack command. So when we run the build script, it's going to call Webpack. Webpack is going to discover this webpack.config.js file, and it's going to use it to build our project. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to, well, actually we'll do that in a second. All right, so now we have that command set up. Before we can run it, there are just two quick things we want to do. Let's go back to the webpack.config.js file. The first thing that we need to fix is the entry. We need to make this a relative path, so we can just do /hello.js. The dot basically means the current directory, and we're saying we want to get hello.js in the current directory. You could also use the resolve, so path.resolve dir name hello.js, just like that. The point is that this needs to be a relative path, not an absolute path like it was before. So now it's basically, or it needs to be an absolute path. The point is that the path was not correct before, but now it is. And the last thing we need to do is we need to specify the target as node, because we want to run this on Node, and Node has some built-in packages, and so when Webpack, does not see this line, then it's going to look for those packages externally. So for example, path is a package that's included by Node, and so if we were to use this anywhere in our code, then Webpack would have to look externally for it, but if we mark the target as Node, then it will know, that that's basically, that's a built-in package. So we have our Webpack config file all set up nicely, and so now we can do yarn run, and then the name of the command, which we said here is build, and you'll see it's going to run, and that's it. We got basically all of these different packages, and it's done. If we take a look inside of the dist folder, we now have a file called bundle.js, which is exactly what we told it to be called. We said we wanted to stick it in the dist folder, and we wanted to call it bundle.js. Now, if we take a look in this, this code looks a little bit strange, but it essentially combines all of the pieces of code that we need into one file, and then it sticks it in this one file. This one file is executable, and it will work just as we expect. Let's just take a look for a second in Finder, and this bundle.js is 1.4 megabytes. So it's not small by any means. It's still, relatively large for a file like that. But the point is that the node modules folder was 5.7 megabytes for, so it was 5.7. For reference, it's now 61 megabytes after we installed the Webpack stuff. But it was 5.7 megabytes before, and the outputted file is 1.4 megabytes. So the tree shaking helped us out by only giving us the code that we actually needed. But the point is that this one file right here, this bundle.js file, is now good to go. We can actually run this file itself. And so what we can do is we can change our configuration so that instead of running hello.js, it'll run dist/bundle.js. So it'll actually run the bundled code instead of just running, the raw hello.js code. And if we run it, you'll notice that it works in the exact same way. You can ignore this error about the buffer. It's not important. It's just a node error, but you get the exact same output that you did before. And the last thing that you can do to make this a little bit nicer is, let's say that every time you hit run, you want Webpack to rebuild all of your code before you run it so you have the latest version. So what you can do is you can add a new configuration. You can say run npm script, and we want to do npm, we want to do run, and the name of the script is build, of course. And so you can see that before we launch this, this configuration, we want to run the npm script build, and that's the script that we defined right here, which is Webpack. And so now when we hit run, you'll notice that it does npm build, which builds it. It says yarn run build. It builds it like that. It takes just about 2 seconds, and then it runs just like this. So it now, every time we hit run, will build the latest code and then run it. So just to show you, if we put in a new message, like we say loading, just like that, I now run it again. It's going to run Webpack, and now it's going to say loading again, because we changed this code, but when we hit the run button, it got rebuilt with Webpack and outputted. So the essential idea is that this one file, this bundle.js file, is now a standalone piece of code. I could take this, I'm going to copy this file, and I'm going to stick it on my desktop, so somewhere else, and then I'm going to open this, I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to just say node bundle.js. And you'll notice that it works exactly the same. We even get some color in the terminal. But it does the exact same thing. It says loading there, and then it outputs the data. So I took this file completely out of the context of the project, and I stuck it on my desktop. I could have stuck it on someone else's computer for all I care, and I just ran it with Node, and it just worked. So all of the dependencies, all of the other code was bundled into it, and it just works. And just to show you, as a comparison, let's just take the hello.js file. This is just the raw, this is like our, 6 lines of code. I'm going to stick that on the desktop, and I'm going to try to run that by itself. So if we do node hello.js, you'll notice that we get some error. It says cannot find module request, right? Because we're trying to import this request module. We don't have it here. So then we basically have to copy all of that code over. So the point is that Webpack will actually build all of our code into one file that we can then upload to a server or share with other people or whatever we want to do with it. But it all happens automatically with Webpack, and that's why Webpack is so nice. So you'll probably end up using Webpack in all of your projects. I don't see why not. It bundles everything together. It's great for server-side applications, so you don't have to manage dependencies on your server, and it's crucial for client-side web applications. So when we get to our Angular series, Angular actually uses Webpack internally to manage everything, because you can't possibly give a node modules folder to a browser and expect that to work. You have to actually package everything up into a single discrete file, and then you can serve that file. So that is all for this video on Webpack. Now in the next video, we're going to take a look at testing with Mocha. Mocha is a testing framework, and we will be able to do some unit tests to ensure that our code is working exactly how we expect it to. So as always, subscribe if you want to see more. Comment with what you want to learn. If you like this video, click the like button. I will see you guys soon with some more coding. Bye for now.